Aloha everyone. Before we begin the next panel, we would like to share a few reminders for attendees who are seeking CLE credit for this event. For those attending in person, please make sure you have checked in with the law review staff in the front of CR2, and please make sure to also sign out with them before you leave. And for all CLE attendees, both online and in person, please email the law review after the event so that you can receive your CLE certificate. We will now begin panel 2. Due to the limited time allotted for this panel, we are unable to accept questions from the audience today, but we thank you so much in advance for your understanding. Our second panel today is titled Kūkulu Kaiāulu, Uplifting Community Water Protectors. This panel aims to center on and uplift community voices and water protectors with a focus on base building and cross-community communication. Leaders of different generations will share strategies and lessons learned from their ongoing water rights battles. Where panel 1 traces the evolution of the legal doctrine, panel 2 traces the genealogy of water protectors exercising their rights to water on the ground. We are very honored to have serving as our moderator today, Kūʻulu A kupa of Makena Honua Ula, Maui, Kūʻulu is a post-JD legal fellow at Kahuliau Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law and an alumna of the William S. Richardson School of Law. Alongside Professor Kapua Sprout, Kūʻulu currently teaches the law school's Native Hawaiian Rights Clinic, which has been working over the course of the school year to help Maui Komohana community members navigate legal issues relating to water use permitting and fire recovery. As a law student, Kūʻulu worked through the clinic to aid Waioli Valley kalo farmers in their recovery from a major flooding event and to establish greater protections for those exercising their pertinent rights and traditional and customary cultivation practices. Kūʻulu also served as one of the Volume 43 Editors-in-Chief of the University of Hawaiʻi Law Review, and upon graduation clerked for the Honorable Lisa M. Ganoza, then Chief Judge of the Intermediate Court of Appeals. Kūʻulu is involved with a number of Maui Nui community organizations, including the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, and merges her legal advocacy skills with Aloha Aina to Hoʻoulu Kaiāulu. For our panelists, we are very honored to have on our panel today, Hokuau Pellegrino. A kupa of Waikapu, Hokuau Pellegrino is a kalo farmer and the current president of Hui o Nawai Eha, a Native Hawaiian organization focused on water resource management and repairing the ecological and cultural harms caused by sugar plantations and private companies in central Maui. Since 2003, Hokuau and his ohana have been at the forefront of efforts to restore Mauka to Makai stream flow to the Waikapu, Wailuku, Waiʻehu, and Waiheʻe streams, and have brought their claims before the Water Commission and state appellate courts. Hokuau continues to engage his Maui community and provide support to communities across Hawaii in their efforts to protect natural and cultural resources and to perpetuate traditional and customary practices. Beyond his work with the Hui, Hokuau currently serves as the sustainability and Aina-based learning designer and facilitator at Kamehameha Schools Maui, and runs Noho Ana Farms, a 2-acre family farm that traditionally cultivates kalo through an ancient lo'i kalo agricultural system fed by the fresh waters of the Waikapu stream. We are also honored to have Paul Rapun, a kupa Waihole, Oahu, and graduate of Harvard University. Paul Rapun is a kalo farmer and renowned proponent of traditional and customary cultivation practices. Over the last 50 years, Uncle Paul has advocated for stream restoration and the reasonable access to water for pertinent right holders and riparian users on Kuleana and Kalo lands. Raised on both Molokai and Oahu, Uncle Paul and his ohana have been cultivating kalo and other crops at Waianu Farm in Waihole Valley for decades. Uncle Paul, alongside his brother Charlie, were instrumental in returning stream water to its natural course as the sugar industry began its decline in the 1970s. In 1976, Uncle Paul was a named party in the lawsuit Rapun versus Board of Water Supply, where he and his brother sought to halt water diversions from Waiheʻe Stream. The lawsuit eventually made its way to the Hawaii Supreme Court, where Chief Justice Richardson ruled in Uncle Paul's favor and clarified that riparian water rights cannot be severed from the land. Today, Uncle Paul continues to be a fierce advocate for traditional and customary practices and the equitable allocation of fresh water in Waihole and beyond. Last but not least, we are joined today by Kanoelani Stewart. A kupa of Maui Komohana, Kanoe Stewart is a devoted advocate for her Lahaina community. Through her work as a science and Hawaiian language arts kumu at Kūkulu Kaiāulu o Lahaina, Kanoe shares her passion for Olelo Hawaii with her haumana and prepares the next generation of kuaʻaina to carry their culture forward by providing them an education that is grounded in kaiāulu and aloha aina. Kanoe also serves as president of the West Maui Preservation Association, and in that role is active in the conservation, protection, and restoration of Maui Komohana's natural and cultural environment. A graduate of the University of Hawaiʻi at Hilo, Kanoe holds a BS in Marine Science, a BA in Hawaiian Studies, and a master's degree in Hawaiian Language and Literature. She also completed UH Hilo's Kahua Viola Indigenous Teacher Education Program and served as a Marine Conservation Fellow with the Nature Conservancy Hawaii. Thank you, Kūʻulu, Hokuau, Uncle Paul, and Kanoe for being here today. I will now turn over to Kūʻulu to begin the panel discussion.
Mai nā waia kea o Hawaiʻi I Waikapu, ka makani ko kololio e noho ana I ka malu o ka hala wai. Nā ua pa'u pili o lele I maluia I ka lau ulu, nā wai ka he o wai anu, e hanai ana I nā kalopa'a o waia hole, ai ka wai o halulu o ka anae kapu. Aloha nui a e ola kākou. Aloha. Aloha e nā kupuna, nā mākua, nā kumu, nā haumana, me nā loyo ke anaina I ākuakua mai nei e ho'olohe kia mau leo kupa'a mahope o ka wai. Aloha to our esteemed guests and participants today. Mahalo for joining us for this wonderful panel entitled Kūkulu Kaiāulu. And I just am so privileged and honored to sit with all of these, my superheroes essentially. And I'm so grateful for the Law Review choosing this topic because it's so critical that we listen to their voices. So as I was preparing for this panel, I was thinking, why? Why is this important? Why is it critical to share these voices in particular? And my conclusion essentially is, as you'll see in the description of this panel, moʻokūʻauhau, or genealogy. It's a genealogy of our kaiāulu, our community's struggle over wai. And put in other terms, for those familiar with this concept, collective memory. Professor Eric Yamamoto writes, justice struggles through claims of right are, first and foremost, active, present-day struggles over our collective memory. That is, the memory of a group and how the public's perception of history is framed. So, as we heard in the opening remarks this morning, Hawaii is at a crossroads, as is the world. Wai is fundamental and is part of the struggle over who will control the future of Hawaii and essentially, ultimately, humanity. So my goal for today in this panel is that we listen intently to the stories of these kiaʻi wai, our water protectors, who have been exercising their constitutionally protected rights through the legal system. And we as the audience then become active participants and advocates in their struggle over the collective memory of wai for a better Hawaii. So now I'll begin. My first question to our panel, and I'll pose all these questions to our panelists, but I'll start with Uncle Paul here. Please share with us how you got involved in the fight over wai.
Well, we couldn't be not involved, as it turned out, because my brother and I started farming, came back from college and some travels and things, started farming. And we got a piece of land that had a stream on each side, the two rivers. It was in the confluence of two streams. And so this piece of land, that my father was a doctor, his patient was an old man chicken farmer who used to be a mechanic, and he said he had a piece of land, and my father said, I got two useless sons. And that was my brother Charlie and I, and he says these two useless sons could use something to do, right? So we got this piece of land. We had a tractor with no implements on it and nothing, no way to know how to farm. So the first thing we did, we started picking up rocks. We made a sled out of plum logs. We picked up these rocks because the land was covered with rocks. And my father, in spite of the fact that he was a doctor, loved to build rock walls. And our job was to go up the mountain behind our house, roll the rock walls down, rocks down, and my father would build the rock walls. So we gathered all these piles of rocks, and we said, what are we going to do with these rocks? We'll build a rock wall. So we built two big semicircular walls. And the Hawaiians never, Taro patches pretty much never were curved. They pretty much had corners to them, straight walls. But we built these two big curved crescents, and we leveled it off and everything. We did all that work, handwork, and said, so now we're going to do this. We want to plant taro, right? So we went to go see the only person we knew to grow taro, Rachel Hall, who lived a couple valleys over in Waihe'e Valley, and said, we need some huli. And she looked at us, and two hippie guys with long hair, and she went, I got to go look at your place. So she did, and that place, she said, oh, these guys are hard workers. So she gave us the huli, and our first crop, we had brought in water. The story of how we got the water in there is a long story, but we had way too little bit water. And the taro all rotted. The water coming out of the taro patch, we used to bathe on. We thought, this is a good dual purpose. We can bathe in hot water and grow taro too, but the taro all rotted. And so we went back to her, we got more huli, we planted again, same thing. She said, why don't you come farm my place? And so we did. And as it turned out, that was when the Board of Water Supply was going up Mauka and drilling new wells on top of their old wells and their tunnel and taking more water. So these trucks were going up the road with all the pipe. And the farmers were starting to fight with each other over water. And it's like, this is an act of God. The stream is becoming smaller. It's an act of God. And we said, well, God works in mysterious ways. But we said, I guess God is driving water trucks up this valley, So we found out, what was going on. They were drilling these new wells. And it just so happened at that time, Cooper Brown and George Hudis was a professor, and Cooper was an attorney. They were looking for somebody to take a water case. So we met down at Lau's Drive-In with these two guys. We met, we talked, and they decided to come up with this water case. My brother Charlie and I, we were more or less indigent and didn't own land or anything, so we qualified for legal aid, and we became clients of legal aid, and the other tenants were represented by Cooper Brown. So Ron Albee was our lawyer, and they called him Mad Dog Albee. He had just come from fighting Indian water wars on the mainland, and we took this case, and we just kind of blew him away. We had a really good case, really good lawyers, and we fought that case, and water got restored to Waihe'e Stream, and it was pretty much the first time, not restored, but they had to leave a certain amount in the stream. And that was Judge Arthur Fong. The case was appealed, of course, and that was Judge Richardson, right? Chief Justice who reviewed that appeal. And so it went over McBride, it reaffirmed McBride. It said that, that water could not be taken from the mountain to the detriment of downstream flow. There was a lot of things that got revisited in that case, and it was really kind of an important case. And it made us into activists. So not just farmers, but activists. We had to be educated about this subject. We couldn't be hippies anymore. Couldn't just live up in the mountain. We had to get involved. So that's kind of how we first got involved in water cases.
Mahalo. Hokua.
Aloha mai kākou. I think when Kaulu was mentioning about moʻokūʻauhau, and our relationship and connection to these cases and our the work that we do, I think for me it really was moʻokūʻauhau, both figuratively and literally speaking. 4 generations back for me, I had a great grandfather who was cultivating kalo, who was in my opinion advocating to continue this traditional practice in the Waiʻeha. And then on the other side of on one of the other sides of my moʻokūʻauhau, I had a kupuna that looked at water more so as a commodity, and so coming to terms with that, I feel like these things are just kind of meant to be involved in. And in my time at University of Hawaiʻi at Hilo, being the child of 2, makua who were both professors at the University of Hawaiʻi at Maui, and just really pushing me to learn more about the areas and things that I was not kama'aina to as a Kanaka. I just happened to fall into the place of a home that had a roommate, the son of, our daughter of Uncle Paul Rapun. And so Kealohi was a very important, friend and just, person that really pushed me to return to our ancestral land and to kind of overcome some of those, the eha, the shame, and even just not really understanding about the role that you need to play as a kanaka. And so that took me back to my backyard, literally, in the ili'aina of Noho'ana in Waikapu. And knowing that the kahawai, trickled, next to our home, and knowing that there was this vast invasive forest behind us that, had this amazing complex of lo'ikalo. It was, Uncle Paul coming to Maui and Kealohi, and my dad and us literally crawling through the hau bush, and for me, like my kilo lens was not there, and in the sense of seeing what they were seeing, and and I remember Uncle Paul, as we were climbing and crawling through the hau, was like, oh, there's a wall over there. Oh, that might be the awai, and I'm like, I see rocks and I see a dip in the lepo. And so that really set us forth for the restoration of our aina, with Oni Pa'auna Hui Kalo, the Rapun Ohana, our community, and then on that same 2-day period where I thought, kalo farming was really going to be the not the end all, but what it was going to be the focal point of my work. Uncle Paul and Uncle Charlie folks also brought kapua sprout to Maui at that time. So they were in cahoots for sure. In making this next iteration come to life, and really, this was in 2004, so 20 years ago, almost to the day actually. We began this journey. The same year we began the restoration of Noho'ana and Waikapu was the same year that Hui o Nawaiʻiha was established, and it really was at a time where Wailuku sugar, Wailuku agribusiness had, was fading away from their cultivation of plants, but transitioning to becoming, a corporate water company and selling that water back to the very people that, once utilized those resources. And so that was a critical, it was just really a time that many things were coming together, for me, finishing school, getting involved. My father was on the early board of Hui o Nawaiʻiha, and so I watched things kind of from the distance. I was involved in helping to translate water use permits and, getting our community together, but really not taking the lead, because at that time I really didn't know how. And so it was really watching, early folks like the late, John Dewey, Kupuna from Waihe'e and so on, that really helped to push me to become more vocal and to be more active. And being the president of Hui o Nawaiʻiha today, I was kind of looking back at some of, I have this like running list of just not only who was involved at the beginning, but who has since passed. And just in the last 20 years of doing this, we've lost over 25 of those, very early on, kupuna and board members, and so that's been, I think, a little challenging. And now starting to look inward and going back to moʻokūʻauhau is now that waters are flowing forth again in Nawaiʻiha. How is the next generation preparing themselves, activating themselves to continue on the work that we're doing? And I say this all the time, and I apologize if you've heard this a million times from me, but it's restoring water back to Nawaiʻiha wasn't like that, movie Field of Dreams where it's like you build it and they'll come. It really was having to engage that next generation of haumana, which is why I think for me I decided to go down the path of education because there wasn't this flock of mahiʻai coming forth as these waters came back into the streams. It was a matter of understanding their relationship to their aina kuleana, their relationship to their moʻokūʻauhau, and also their just understanding and how to be a mahiʻai, because in Waiʻiha we really were, we were the largest contiguous kaolai growing region, but we also were one of the birthplaces for the sugar industry. So this, colonized mindset and practice of moving away from aina really occurred early on. And so what once was the largest now has become one of the smallest kaolai growing regions in all of Hawaii. And so plenty work to do.
Mahalo. Oh, first, I'll just sum up their ideas because then I'll pass it to you, Kanoe, as one of the younger people in the moʻokūʻauhau of this water protection movement. It seems like for Uncle Paul and Hokuā as farmers, when you become so entrenched in your aina or kupa, as we say it, when you're living on your land, you can't help but be an activist. It's part of being a farmer and needing the water is speaking for it and speaking for the resources, and that's ingrained in who you folks are and the legacy you will leave. So now I'll pass it to Kanoe as a newer, one of the newer or younger people in this moʻokūʻauhau of Hawaii. Can you share how you got involved?
Aloha kako, mahalo keia hui ana. Yeah, I've definitely just started, maybe like 5 minutes ago. But I think I first got involved when I was still working for the Nature Conservancy as a fellow. We had to do like this big capstone project, and I wanted to try to make my way back home to Lahaina. And so I remember going back home. Every time I went back home, because we were living over here on Oahu, I'd always try to make it a point to go visit the Ohana Kiaʻi. Okay, guys, he's on a later panel. But I just kept asking him, like, I got to do this project with the fellowship. And he's like, what's that for, a church? And I'm like, oh, no, it's like conservation. But, just always being around all the uncles and the people that, like, knew what I didn't know about Lahaina, where I'm from. And so he kept talking about water. He kept talking about Kahoma and Kanaha. And I didn't even know these places, and they're like right there where we've been growing up. And so focusing on, we focused on fish biodiversity in the streams. I was working with Uncle Skippy Howe, if you guys are familiar with him. But that's kind of like what I focused on for my capstone project, and that's kind of where it started. It's what brought me home. And that's like when I started to learn how to testify in front of Seaworm, and then I became a kumu, and so then, all of the days to testify are all school days, so it's like, okay, how do I bring the whole haumana, bring the whole crew? And so in order to be prepared and to prepare the haumana, it's like, okay, who is Seaworm? Who are all these people? How did they get there? What is their background? What is Seaworm a part of? Oh, they're part of the DLNR. And so really doing all of this background research, and then in the meantime, going and spending time with all the kalo farmers. I'm not a kalo farmer, but I know them. And so making all of these huaka'i to go visit all of these places, always making it a point to go out to Honokohau and Kaua'ula, and spend time and be with the people that utilize these places, that utilize the vai, and to give these experiences to our haumana as well. I got to grow up going to Honokohau and Kaua'ula because of Uncle Kai, but I don't know about the haumana that are in school now. And so being that we can do this for them and kind of expose them to another area of vai, that's kind of where I got involved and where I still am.
Mahalo. And Kanoe also brought a group of her students, 8th graders, to testify before the House this past week, actually, at the Capitol for the water bill that Isaac folks were talking about. So she really is raising the next generation of kiaʻi vai, making it all the logistics and stuff to bring 8th graders, prepare them to testify live in person is just amazing. Mahalo. Okay, the next question I have, again, relates to moʻokūʻauhau in naming your greatest adversaries or your greatest supporters in this fight. I think it's important that we name them because it brings faces to the people that have been working behind the scenes, either against you or with you and for you. And it's important that we are brave enough to say their names, whether they have power and they continue to have influence over our islands and our water. So that's my next question. I guess I'll pass to Hokuau first. You can share whatever you want, greatest adversaries and or supporters. So also for our audience to know who they are and that we can participate in this collective memory movement that we're trying to build.
For me personally, at this point in time in my life, I really don't even want to put any mana into even speaking the name of those that work against us. I don't think it needs to be said. I think we know who those people are, but rather uplift the work that many people have that people have been doing, and I think majority of the people in this room, in this time and place, I think a lot about the moku of Lahaina and Malu'ulu Olele, and I think about Kaipa, and I think about Kai and Kanoi and all that they're going through in Lahaina after what has occurred. And I think for me personally as well, in the work that we're trying to do with Hui o na Waiʻiha, it's made us, I think, a lot more close in the ability to not necessarily segregate ourselves by huis, but really looking at what the future is like for Mauna o Eka. And is it Hui o na Waiʻiha, and is it Maui ko Mahana, or is it really looking, or even East Maui, having a more collective approach, collaborative approach to addressing these issues, understanding that there are unique cases and specifics to those particular regions, but through these kind of trials and tribulations, I feel like it's brought us together in ways that we haven't come together before. I think a lot about Uncle John Dewey, who was our first president and founder of Hui o na Waiʻiha, and even my own father, who had recently passed. Neither of them were Kanaka, but they had this a love for Aina that really transcended beyond sometimes like my own comprehension and understanding of the why. I think for me, I'm still trying to figure that out. But knowing that that if we live here, right, in Hawaii, it doesn't matter what's flowing through our veins, but rather how we articulate and show our love for place. And I think I think that's really important right now, in that we are uplifting everybody who's willing to stand up for our Aina, whether they're from here or not, because I think at this point in time we need advocates everywhere. And so I think I uplift those names, and I appreciate the work that all of you folks are doing in this room. Aaron we wouldn't know what we know with our streams today if it weren't for Aaron, who is an amazing hydrologist that works for Seaworm, that goes above and beyond into the field, works with our community. I mean, his job description might be like this, but he's doing this. We can't lose people like that in these roles. I think about Isaac and the decades-long work that he has done, and listening to the last panel, I was like, I don't want to go follow these guys, because there's still so much more that we need to learn, not only from the legal side of it, but also the community side, and seeing that there's this next generation of haumana, in law school, like yourself, Ka'ulu, who has joined our board recently, so has given me hope, and for me, that's the mana that's where I want to put my mana into now. Early on, everybody knows. I mean, I was kind of an angry guy, I was upset about who, not just the WHO was trying to take these resources and these resources away, but even those who were representing the people that were, but I'm in a different place now, and I like to put my energy in people like you guys.
Be careful about that.
Mahalo hokuau, Uncle Paul. You can share some battle stories if you want. In law, we call it.
I wouldn't know where to begin. Listening to the last panel, I too went back and looked at McBride decision and Rapul versus Border Water Supply and the Waihoʻi case, and there was so much that was in there that just struck me. It was so important and beautiful, and I thought, that's just me, you know. But to hear Isaac say, you know, that this was a really radical boss decision, and it made me feel really good. But you know, when we first our allies, right? We had legal aid, who after our case in Waihe'e, the legislature passed a law saying legal aid could no longer take land in water cases because they're too successful. So then along came Seracom Legal Defense Fund, which became Earth Justice, and they were such terrific lawyers. It's so helpful. But they always told us, you have to fight the battle in the court of public opinion. And so we did. And they supported us, but we went down to, Kapolei or someplace, and this was a room full of 1,000 people, half of them wearing green shirts that they had been issued by Del Monte or somebody. And we were just, a small little handful of farmers coming there. We were going to make our case to the neighborhood board or whatever. And these people, by the end of that night, they were on our side. And we learned something from that. And that was, first of all, never make enemies of your enemy. And that was really important. So when I say, who are your enemies? Well, this is our enemy. This kind of thing, I don't like that kind of thing. And that's not a person, that's an object, yeah? So development is always an enemy, population growth is always an enemy. The Waihoʻi water case, first of all, we wanted more water for taro because our taro was unhealthy. And so we said, we got to make it a little bit bigger than that. That's kind of selfish. So we need more water for the stream, for the Oʻopu and the Hihiwai and the Opai and all that. The water flows into the ocean. Kaneohe Bay is one of the two biggest estuaries in the whole Pacific, and the other is Pearl Harbor, which is totally polluted. So Kaneohe Bay is really important. That water flowing in there, we're not quite sure how it works in all its details, but that is really important, that estuary. So, but what do they need the water for on the other side? They need it for, the sugar's gone, so they scrambled to get farmers in there, gave them no more than 15-year leases. And the true intent became clear that they wanted to eventually develop that land, keep farming on it for a while because that kept their taxes low. But eventually it would all be converted, as has happened in Hoʻokipa, where Alun Farms has had to give up a lot of their land, and they are required by their lease to support that development. The farmer has to support it. So this issue, it dealt with population control, it dealt with construction industry, tourism, everything got done. But I am an evangelical farmer. I believe that we all, if we trace our genealogies back, we're going to end up with farmers or fishermen. But even the fishermen back then were farmers too. So we need to get back to something like that, because when you want to look at the public trust doctrine, there's a conflict between public good, which is water supply claim public good, they're giving people water. Developers creating a lot of jobs, they need water for their development, and then competing with farmers and things like that. You need to weigh the different uses of water in such a way that the public good is maximized. Well, how do you do that? Well, one of the things that we did not talk about back when Waiahole was being fought and when our Waihe'e battle was being fought was, first of all, sustainability, and secondly, climate change. Those were not words that were used back then. Maybe sustainability a little bit, but now those are really important. So when we judge things in terms of that, we have to take into consideration population control and what can be kept on going. The construction industry is obviously can't go on forever. So I'm not totally opposed to construction. I think it can be done in a very different way. I have some ideas about what a good construction project would look like, and it would be self-sustainable. And I think we need to consider all those things when we talk about public trust. So when I say I'm an evangelical farmer, I think everybody should know something about farming, at least know about farming. And secondly, you should, if you got a balcony on the 24th floor of whatever building down there, you should, on your balcony, you should have a pot with some green onions growing in it, at the very least. Because you'll learn something from that little pot of green onions. Green onions is probably the easiest one. So, but you know, that's the way I feel about farming, that fighting this battle in the court of public opinion means that we need to talk about all those issues, sustainability, climate change, all these things. And we were told that our lawyers can fight it in the courts, but they won't win in the courts. We will win if we get both of those two things together. So again, one more thing about genealogy is, for me, having continuity on the land, which is what Waihoʻi is about, because the state stepped in and bought that valley in 1977 in order to keep it in farming and to defuse the revolution that was taking place there. But it allows farmers to have continuity with their land. That's extremely important. The ali'i can come and go. The maka'ainana stay with the land. And why is that? Because that what I call endemic knowledge is really important. You need to know every little thing about your land that makes it more productive. And so you can't just be flitting around. You can't have Alun farms go out of business and go someplace else now. They've lost that endemic knowledge, which they just began to get in the first place. Anyway, that's my thoughts about it.
Mahalo. Noho papa is when you're on the land, you're so familiar, nobody else knows it like you do. I love that concept. Mahalo. Kanoe, to you. I know, man, I'm just still sweating.
Mahalo for continuing to bring up moʻokūʻauhau. When I was trying to learn more about the water history in Lahaina, you go back into like what happened. How could we have all of these stories about Lahaina being so momona, so abundant, being covered in loʻikalo and in all of these uala fields, and then you start to look at, especially in the Hawaiian language newspapers, about what happened. All of these oihana mahiko started to come up, and then all of our people. They slowly started to go into those spaces and slowly started to maybe forget about this and that and slowly started to lose our water. And so kind of just tracing all of those people, how it was with us, and then Pioneer Mill came in, and then who took over after Pioneer Mill, and then who's the people associated with that, and then what are the groups, what are the companies that they run now. And then you start to see, oh my gosh, all of Ka'anapali, all of those big luxury houses up on the hillside, it's all tied together. And so being aware of that moʻokūʻauhau, but then at the same time highlighting all of the wins that we also see in our history as well. Anakala Keaumoku, he always brings up kumuliʻiliʻi, and so to bring that, to see that in the Hawaiian language newspaper as well, to show the haumana, like look at all of these ohana, over 60 ohana that were already going up against wanting to restore water in Kauaʻula, and so they did it before, we can do it again. And then bringing them to these spaces, being involved in all of these little things happening, so that they see the people like, oh, Uncle Kaipo, he's testifying. Like, yeah, we go to his farm. Like, he does more than just farm, And so, but highlighting all the uncles that we see just at the store, highlighting the people, getting to know the people on Seaworm, Uncle Neil, Aurora, I see Jonathan, Aloha. So just like how Kō'ulu was saying, giving all of these people a name, and sharing that within my little circle with the haumana at school. I definitely would encourage that with everybody in here as well.
Mahalo. Okay, the next one kind of brings us to a bigger picture. Some of you touched on it already, but what has been your biggest lesson over the years? That's more so for Hokua and Uncle Paul. Never make enemies of your enemy. I got that one down for sure. Yeah. But
yeah, and plant something in your pot on the 24th floor. The biggest lesson, I don't know. I don't know. It's a hard one. It's don't be afraid of trying something. That's true about farming. If you don't know how to grow taro, put a huli in the ground, and if it dies, you're going to learn something, right? So the same with any kind of legal fight or whatever, right? Give it a try, see what you can do with it, and if you believe you're right, you just keep following that path. And to me, it's fun. You know, I think maybe being a lawyer is as much fun as being a farmer. I'm not sure. But you know, you try something, and that's the thing is you'll never even begin to know everything. You know, especially true about farming. It's like taro. I've been growing wetland taro for maybe close to 50 years now, and I got more questions than answers, and I get more questions every day. And you know, I think that lawyers face a kind of a real conflict in their lives. Do they want to uphold the law if they don't believe in what that law is? And no lawyer is going to believe all the laws are correct. And so you try and change them. And how do you do that? And how do you do that in a way that you know, you're true to yourself, but you find yourself in a position where you've got to uphold the law, even though you don't agree with the law? I don't know how to answer that question.
No.
So, okay, I'll stop there.
No, that's beautiful. They always say that no one person will ever know everything about the law. So I guess it's the same, true as in farming.
I don't know. For me, it's just aina engagement and at an early age, and getting our young to not just get their hands dirty, but also to eat what they're growing. And I feel like that's been kind of this next iteration for us now as mahiʻai in Hawaiʻi, and trying to rebuild this food system, is that you know, the work is hard, it's rewarding, but at the same time, you know, what does that work transcend and translate to? You know, at the end of the day, a lot of these things that we're protecting are food sources, and so how do we integrate these very nutritious, sustainable, indigenous, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, our staple foods back into our diet and on a regular basis, so that we, you know, decolonize our palate in a sense and restore that ancestral ono for these things. And I think for me now, it's like you do it through food. It just makes it easier for them to want to ask questions, to be engaged, to want to be a part of it. And so there's like, you know, this program we're doing is called Poi for the Pepe, right? And it's this idea of getting, just very simply, just getting poi back into, you know, the mouths of our young again, and getting them to be acquainted with our ancestral foods, and to ensure that they desire that, they have that ono, and that, again, as I mentioned, that it brings about a greater desire to be connected and to return back to their moʻokūʻauhau in some respect. So,
Kanoi?
I would definitely kākoʻo that, you know, working with the haumana on the daily. And then also, like, you know, all of like the little things are mea nui. You know, all of the haumana, every time we get to go on a huaka'i to somewhere, oh, are we going to ku'i today? Like, you can't just jump in and ku'i all the time, ku'i kala all the time. You know, and so just like little things. Okay, we're just going to weed today, you know, all of the quarters of the kalo patch and everything. And they get a little bored with that, but just reiterating, like, you know, when you get to pull out all of these little things that are growing, all this kind of stuff, what are you doing? Oh, you're helping the water flow a little bit. And, you know, Ako was talking about, like, not having enough water flow, it affects the growth of kalo. And so just trying to find all the little connections that are a mea nui, I think, and not just in huaka'i. I'm sure there's like a lot of little cases in law. I know nothing about law, but they also are probably mea nui as well.
can I add something to that?
Oh.
One thing I wanted to put the plug in is when you see this, going back to my thing about aina engagement, is that we had Halau Kumana come and visit our farm 3 days ago, and that is a school, you know, where, I mean, they are they are breeding them to be, I don't want to say activists, but really true advocates for our aina. And so, these are juniors that came to our aina, and you don't have to say anything. They just know exactly what to do. But they were doing that from the very beginning and of their education. And so I really appreciated that ability and that, this helea ma'a, right? They go and they become familiar, so familiar that it's second nature, right? You don't have to even explain. They know exactly what to do. And being that there are advocates here on island to be able to go when we have these Senate and House bills, come forth, and now that Kanoi and Sesame and others are bringing their haumana from other islands to advocate, for our resources on the island that's a little farther away is really critical, and to have those voices there are so important. But it just models the work that great kumu like Kanoi and others are doing in the educational system.
Thank you. And to try and bring it out home, now I'm gonna ask you a more pointed question. It's if you could give one message to a decision maker based on your experience, what would it be? You could give more if you want, but this is more getting your voices as the people with your hands turned down to the soil, cultivating, you guys are boots on the ground working in our community. What would your message be to our decision makers?
Yeah, please do.
Oh, I would say come to us. That I think it was Laura Ka'ahua, when we were having, we were battling out about mala and access and commercial permits and stuff. And she spearheaded a little, it wasn't a public hearing and say, but everybody got to come down and testify, and it was right at mala. They set up a makeshift mic and speaker, and everybody brought their own chairs. They were sitting on their tailgates and everything, just in the parking lot, taking up space. But and then when it came time for all of our ohana to go up and testify, all they had to do was point to this, and that. From all the way over there, Mala, all this over here, this is Kahoma. And so for them to meet us at the place that we're talking about is so critical, and it only gives them a better perspective of what we're trying to tell them, all the stories that we want to continue if they're not present and deciding on our side.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in the context of Lahaina, having our decision makers come to the community and not just showing up to the place, but talking to the people who are actually working for the betterment of the people. It's one thing to just take a photo op, but it's another thing to go face to face to somebody who's lost their home.
And to just have it outside, never mind being in a four-walled area and there's not enough seats, there's not enough room, it's hard to get in and out. It's already uncomfortable for us to be in front of people. And so when you put us in a space where you're a little bit uncomfortable, I think it could only help the whole situation.
I think our leaders are they're disconnected. They, a good leader knows who they're leading. They know their constituents. They know the community, and that's what's missing in many of our alakai today for this pai'aina, and that's boots on the ground. Kamehameha is a great example of that, right? And I know it sounds maybe somewhat cliche, but he was also a mahi'ai, so he advocated for farming because he knew how to farm, right? And I'm not saying that someone like the governor needs to come out and spend hours upon hours in the lo'i, but you should come out into the lo'i. You know what I mean? Like come out to these spaces where and to the people that you're leading, you're making really critical decisions, important decisions for their livelihood and their children's livelihood, and so on and so on. So know how those decisions are really affecting them by coming out and really getting a clear picture. I think that would make a big difference. And you see that in some of our alakai that we do lean upon. They're great leaders because they know their physical, spiritual, ecological, so on environment. So
I would echo what both of you say, that if you're a decision maker, get your hands dirty. We get a lot of school groups come up to our farm, and the kids all go do some work, go in the mud or whatever. And so many times the teachers stand on the bank and look like this and give them instructions and stuff. It makes me so irritated. I just want to go behind them and push them in the mud. Because that's not how you're supposed to teach. You're supposed to lead, And you say maybe the governor shouldn't come out work for hours in the law. Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah.
You should.
I take that back.
I mean, it does something to you when you plant something. You have to wait. I think the first crop my brother and I planted in our Ka'alaya farm was papayas, because our landlord, the old Japanese man, he had these soda cans with papaya seedlings like that tall. They were ready to go in the ground. We put that in the ground. We didn't know that papaya is going to take you at least a year before you get fruit, and another 2, 3 years, 4 or 5 years, if you're lucky, of harvesting that fruit. You're stuck. You plant that in the ground, you can't walk away from it. The second thing we planted was Chinese taro, dryland, and that takes at least a year. So that attitude of putting a seed in the ground and being patient and waiting and watching the miracle of it sprouting and growing, I think does something to your psyche. And I think it's all too often not part of our experience. Some kids are getting good gardening programs, most of them are not. And I have a story to tell. But is there anybody here from the Board of Health? No, okay. For like 30 years, we've been planting corn, Thanksgiving at Waiʻi School. We plant a corn crop. And it's usually a good crop, and we share it with Ka'ava school, serve it in the school. For many, many years, most of that time, we would take that corn, harvest it, big fun day. Kids would all harvest the corn, shuck the corn, put it all into the cafeteria, walk in, and then the next day, Thanksgiving lunch, we would all eat the corn. And then the Board of Health said, oh, you cannot do that. You cannot put it in there, walk in, and they cannot cook it. So what we did was we took that corn, we harvested it, we had to go take it nearby to Key Project, store it in their reefer, because they couldn't store it in the school, and then the next day we would go get it, bring it to the school. We would take our burners down on the sidewalk of the cafeteria, cook it, and serve it to the kids. And that was all right. But the cafeteria couldn't do it. This is the attitude, of too many people. You can grow food in the schools, you're not allowed to eat it. You can't serve it in the schools. Unless you're maybe at Puno or Kamehameha or some private school. But the public schools, they can have beautiful gardens with lots of food, they cannot eat it in the school. And there was a time we used to do that, take the food, basil or whatever, mix it with garlic, make some pesto, and we would all eat it, but you can't do that anymore. This is such a narrow-minded kind of an attitude. So I agree with you, and you got to get your hands dirty. You got to know something about farming if you want to make decisions about farming. You got to know something about sustainability before you decide about sustainability. You got to know something about the effects of climate change before you make decisions about it. Everything's got to be thought out a long term, and that's not the way our economy works. It's not the way our construction industry or our tourism industry works. It's always got to keep growing, and we got to do something about that. And I'm all the way down to the teachers who stand on the bank. Those are all our decision makers as well. They're the ones who have a huge kuleana because they're teachers. They should be passing this kind of thing on. And every now and then you get one teacher who jumps in the taro patch, and they don't yell at the kids for running. They don't yell at them for getting muddy, stuff like that. They participate in that, and those are the good teachers.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Community Lawyering 101. Thank you. No, it really is a lesson on how to be a community lawyer for those in the room, as well as a community-based leader, which I think, that's what I would like to see in positions of power, community-based leaders, people who understand our community. So with that, I will conclude our panel. Mahalo nui loa to each and every one of you. And I want to leave our audience with a poem by Remco Kampert. And it goes, asking yourself a question, that's how resistance begins. And then asking another that question, someone resists, and then someone else, and then someone, and then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kūʻulu, Hokuau, Uncle Paul, and Kanoi, for sharing your stories and your mana'o. We greatly appreciate your time today. So now we will break for lunch a little early. Please help yourselves to some food outside. It will be in front of the moot court room. We ask that panelists and moderators line up first, and followed by attendees who RSVP'd in advance. And you may eat lunch here in the courtyard, in classroom 3, wherever you feel most comfortable. And we will return at 1:30 p.m. for panel 3. Thank you so much.